Hi everyone, I just wanted to do a bit of the behind the scenes of how Hold On 2 was made, this sort of vertical slice-esque experiment in Unity. Let's just go through what it kind of looks like from the development side. A big part of this was trying to create an environment that was easy to develop content for Hold On with, because the mechanic is quite simple but expandable, that you just press and hold these keys, so they can be represented by their nodes. So one thing that I was experimenting with was really separating out the logic, so that they can be very flexible in how they're used. So we have this behavior tree, which basically goes through different behaviors that are on the node. So in this setup, they're all different components. Maybe in the future there'd be separate children with components on them, but you can kind of already see the building of pathways, as I've called them here. But I think there's a better word for it, but like almost like how the animator has like a structure to it where you can sequence things. Here you can see that, from it starts in idle, which is the current behavior. Then when under a certain condition, it goes to a different component, a different behavior, and then there are potential pathways from there to the other behaviors. And what that means is in certain conditions, with different behaviors, we can like create these game nodes, which when released will give you like a tick or a cross, or we can create like a UI node where when that's released, it goes back to idle, or the idle isn't even counting down and going to destroy itself, it's just permanently there. So this UI node is not a prefab, I just created it locally, but you see I've got UI idle because it doesn't need to destroy itself after a certain period of time. And then also off the back of that, it then triggers something in the scene, which is to um, restart the game effectively. So that was one element. I think that went pretty well. It keeps the code really segmented, and really easy to manage. Like if there's an issue in a certain behavior, it's quite easy to just isolate that out. The code looks really small ultimately, so we'll just have a look. I mean, even the behavior tree is basically just changing between behaviors. There's a lot of flexibility here in the code base to create more sophisticated trees or types of trees. Even here, I started some structure of that. I have a base tree and then a game tree, but they're basically just doing the same thing. But idle can very much handle its own things about being idle. Overpressed has its own logic, and so does press, but it keeps these all separated rather than this humongous class that's trying to do everything all at the same time, whilst providing that flexibility. The other thing is the timeline, which is something that's new to me in Unity. This is what I've got it to ultimately look like. This is with some sort of personal customizations on it, but I'll go through it now. The timeline is this way of visualizing and sequencing things in the editor as well. So this was a huge part of how do I create um, levels and sequence what content is coming out when. And I was looking at all these other tools that Unity had and all these other solutions that were within my existing realm of knowledge. And this timeline seemed like it was correct. It took a bit of there was a bit of a block of learning that had to be done to even like begin interacting with it. It isn't as simple as just dragging and dropping these things onto the timeline. But I'll kind of go through that now. So I mean, some of these things were built in. So the audio source, this track already exists. So that's fine. This text stuff is actually one of the samples, which is really useful to look at the code of this to understand how it should be structured. To get a clip on the timeline working basically, there's so many facets to it. You need like these up to three or four of these like different classes that are all doing different bits to get the data sort of correct for all the different cases the clip can be in. So this is the example with the text, and how it can kind of blend between um, its transparency or not, and you can kind of see that shows in the editor as well. Um, and in theory, you could like blend between clips, and maybe have like the text transition or something in some fun way. But basically, the data is all there to mess around with. But that's one of the like downloadable samples. This text one. How am I getting my nodes to appear? Um, And I've also got these extra drawn elements on the clips, so that's separate to like the duration of the clip. Yeah, I've effectively created two types of clip here, and there's always a space to create new types of clips as per needed. But I've got one type of clip which is spawning a single letter, um, and there's a bunch of data for that here, and I've sort of added on to it in a bit of a hacky way for the sake of getting this done in time, but you can make this really flexible. There's one parameter that's unique to working on the timeline, which is this exposed reference thing. And that means that it doesn't this value doesn't have to be something that is like prefabbed or just like a value piece of information. It can be something that's referenced from the scene directly. So for these nodes that are spawned on their own, I can reference this node spawner that I already have in the scene, um, even though in a way the timeline at that point, like the where you are in the scope, it would be a bit awkward to get access to that object. But with exposed reference, you can do that because then you can resolve it in the code and it just handles itself. Um, and the other type of clip I created is this spawner asset. So this, rather than just spawning a single node, there are cases where I want nodes to just sort of spawn at, within intervals and, add a bit of randomness in there potentially. So the spawner asset clip was created for that purpose. And then you can see you can like layer them and overlap them and stuff and sequence out the level. What I have done to customize these to give me a bit more information when creating these levels is in these editor classes, you can customize how the clips are rendered in the timeline. So I was messing around with the background to give me an idea of, oh, if this node is so that the duration of the clip is how long the node is idle for. So in this case, you've got 9.5 seconds while the node is like fading away, which is probably a bit long for this case, but that's fine. Then when you press it, you have to hold this for 7 seconds, which without any representation would be a bit awkward to tell how long that is relative to everything else. But that 7 seconds is actually linked to what's being drawn inside the clip. So fortunately, I can't figure out how to draw outside of the clip, which is probably intentional. But you can see then from a design perspective, I can very easily say that, oh, actually, this is how long it's idle for, this is how long I expect it to be pressed. And then I've even got the overpress duration, I think, being, like rendered at that point as well. As a designer, I can kind of see, okay, I expect the letters to be around on the screen for this long. And similarly with the spawner asset, I do some funky maths, which is maybe not accurate, but since these are spawning at intervals, I use the idle duration, the press duration, the overpress duration, and the interval timing to say, okay, at about this point, if a letter spawns here, then it probably will be off the screen by the end of the duration of the clip, which is really good because then I can sequence sections like this where in the track I want there to be a bit of quiet moment, like where the screen kind of clears out, maybe before we start something else. So like here, like that's a really good moment to just give the player a chance to breathe and just appreciate that build up again. And with the asset like this, with that background drawn out, I can like see that. Um, and I think that's really all I want to cover in terms of going behind the scenes. I just think this timeline work was really cool. The behavior stuff was really cool. Um, it's a bit awkward now that this is, as with any project, it's a bit of a mix of really good practices to create something that's like extendable and, looking at it like this in theory, start cracking out levels, start cracking out more narrative moments, add more clip types, add more like mechanics to the game because then, that's just basically another type of clip, right? And not every level has to be this complicated. This is why part of this was to be a vertical slice in that I'm really trying to flex as many things as I possibly could do, but within the time constraints, I was just kind of able to recreate what was originally in Hold On and add a bit more flair. But yeah, as much as a lot of this is built in a really extendable way, a lot of things have been hacked in to get the game done. So yeah, I hope that's interesting to anybody. If not, at least even interesting to myself in the future. The one takeaway from this, I would say, is that if you're ever trying to get back into doing timeline related stuff, just hit up the samples that you can download additionally with them. Just have a look at the samples that they provide and try to use one of those as an example of, oh, I'm trying to have this effect happen where I can like overlap clips and how do I set up the structure for that? Or I just need a custom signal sender thing. So what do I do about that? And yeah, I think with my base knowledge now of timelines from watching videos and reading the documentation, and then looking back at these samples, it should be manageable to recreate something with yeah, something new from these samples. So yeah, enjoy Hold On if you've already played it, and if you haven't, then go to the website and give the game a go. But yeah, thank you for watching.